Hello everybody, so I'm going to continue to talk about growth. So you have the whole morning talking about growth, but I'm not going to look at the stem cells or anything. We're going to look a little bit at bigger scale. So I'm going to today talk about building a high resolution productivity map for Norway using remotely sensed data, machine learning, and many other variables. So for the last decade, we have been building in Norway a forest resource map. It's a high resolution, it has a pixel size of 16 by 16 meter, and it has information about volume that you can find in the forest, about biomass. It's based on empirical models that uses remotely sensed data like airborne laser scanning and the National Forest Inventory plots. Right, so we have information of what is right now in Norway in the forest. You have species, you have volume, but we don't know what's going to happen next, right? We cannot grow it. We don't know what's going to happen with this forest. So what we needed, it was a productivity map, which basically a productivity map in forestry, usually we estimate it with an indicator that is site index, right? But it basically measures how happy the trees are in the place, right? If this species is going to grow well or it's not going to grow well. So we had different alternatives to build this site index, this productivity map, right? So we had this airborne laser scanning for some areas, but it's a static image, right? So, but if we have two, in some cases we have two, we could calculate how much or how well it's growing, and we can have an estimate of site productivity. We could also use existing site models, but they do need information that is only available at plot level, like for example, soil type or vegetation type, right? So most of them had several caveats for this purpose that we wanted. We had also forest management inventories, FMIs, which are the inventories that the forest owners do for their property, right? And they usually include productivity for the species they are growing. So most of these possibilities that we considered at the beginning had some caveats, some problems. They are not available for all forest areas, for most of the cases. For non-forested areas, because you don't have trees, we couldn't estimate the site index, site productivity. And site index, when available, it's only available for the current species. So how something that is not growing there would grow in that place, we don't know. So we wanted a site index productivity map for whole Norway that will be available for all forest areas, also for non-forest areas, and for the three main species in Norway. Okay, so the focus is on predictive performance. We wanted a model that predicts well, that can fill up the whole Norway. What data we have? Potential variables. There are 54 variables that we used. There are climatic, temperature, and precipitation. There is a land resource map that it's from the 70s. That are actually based on field data, so people going to the forest and seeing and describing what they found. There is parental material. We didn't have soil, but we thought maybe parental material can say something about soil quality. We had topographical variables, depth to water, the depth that you have to go in the soil to find water, geographical variables, and also we included airborne laser scanning data and Sentinel-2 bands, right? On the other side, we had the data we used to fit the potential models. That is the National Forest Inventory, which is over 8,000 plots. This is the permanent side. And independently, we also measured temporary plots every 10 or 15 years by region in Norway. The red ones are the NFIs, the National Forest Inventory. You see that covers whole Norway. And the blues and I think it was orange, are the temporary and the FMIs that don't cover one of the largest forested areas in Norway because we deemed it that the data was too old to actually use it. Okay, so but that was a pretty good number for using artificial intelligence, right? So we had good data sets, we have good data, we give it a try, see what goes. So we selected boosted regression trees, which is a machine learning algorithm, and we fitted two types of models. One to define if the site was productive or unproductive. It means that if the trees grows beyond a certain limit or not, and models that if they grow over this certain limit, we define productivity classes, right? So we define models for the three main species to predict their productivity. Advantages. I was a traditional forest growth engineer model, right? So we usually use regression. So I wanted to see a comparison of what is the things that I like about machine learning. And I talk about boosted regression trees, which is the algorithm we use, but I think these advantages are shared by most of at least many of the machine learning algorithms. So, nice things. It's insensitive to outliers and multicollinearity. We use all monthly means, right? There's a lot of collinearity between temperature and precipitation. There is also correlation between the different bands of Sentinel. There's a correlation in all the variables, basically, that we use. So insensitive to outliers is a plus, and multicollinearity. It can also fit nonlinear complex relationships. And that's a tricky one if you do regression, right? Especially when you're dealing with a lot of variables and the relationship might be discontinuous, or they might have ecological thresholds. Like, think, tree is happy when it's wet, but not too wet. And if it's a little bit too wet, it's just not going to work. And if it's a little bit too dry, it's not going to work also, right? So it's not a smooth curve necessarily. It can also automatically detect interactions, so that's work I don't have to do. I mean, you still have to tune the hyperparameter, right? But it's still a positive, I count it in the positive side. It can handle also missing data, which was the problem with some of the layers that we use. Because all the data we use had to have wall-to-wall coverage, right? So we can predict forest productivity in all Norway. And it does not require data transformation. So we throw in variables, and we tune the hyperparameters, and our results were actually quite good. I'm pretty happy. So this, for example, is a comparison on the distribution of siting productivity classes from the National Forest Inventory, so that's true data. Okay, that's the light gray, and the dark gray is what our productivity site index boosted regression tree, what we were predicting. And this is in the validation data, right? So it's independent data. So I think it's pretty good. We had some problems at the beginning with predicting correctly the lower and the higher classes, but we found a way to do it. And pretty happy with the results. If we look at the root mean square error, so how good our models are, on the dark gray is the boosted regression trees, and on the light gray is the forest management inventories. So this is the models, so the data that is currently used for forest management. And we see that for birch, which is the right one, we outperform FMI, so the lower the better, right? We outperform the FMIs in almost all the classes. For pine, we also do better in most of the classes. And for spruce, we also do, we match or we are better than the FMIs. So, not bad. So one of the questions was if using remotely sensed data, right, the ALS variables or Sentinel-2 would produce bias or would improve our model at all. Because we are using current information. For example, if you want to say something about, so our theory at the beginning was big trees only occur at high productivity places, right? You don't have big trees in, shitty places for trees, right? So we think, okay, so if trees high, it says something about productivity. It actually didn't work in that way, but it worked in other ways, right? So we use, for example, a crown cover, and that says a lot about if the place is being productive or not, right? So it didn't work the way we intended it, but it worked for other things. So we look at if in places where there is no trees, for example, that has been recently harvested, our models with remotely sensed data would produce bias, while our models without only the traditional variables would not be a bias. The results were like, they're equally bad, to be honest, or equally good if you think about it. So that's remotely sensed data, which is usually not used for this type of productivity mapping. Improve the results. So the light gray is the simple model without remotely sensed data. The black one is the full model with remotely sensed data. So for the deviance, the shorter the bar, the better. And you see that the full model is better, clearly better. For all, or almost all, I think it was all of the sightings classes for all the species. And for discrimination, which is how well the model can discriminate between a site index 6, for example, and a site index 8, our model was also better. Not horribly better, but at least slightly better. So overall, I'm pretty happy. It was a lot of work. something new for me, so it was a little bit of, it was a learning curve, but I have to say it probably would be have been more painful, and the result would not have been as good if I was using traditional regression. And that's it.
for your interesting and quick presentation. We recover the time. Last presentation will be presented by Clara Antón.
Hello everybody, so I'm going to continue to talk about growth. So you have the whole morning talking about growth. But I'm not going to look at the stem cells or anything, we're going to look a little bit at bigger scale. So I'm going to today talk about building a higher resolution productivity map for Norway using remotely sensed data, machine learning, and many other variables. So for the last decade, we have been building in Norway a forest resource map. It's a high resolution, it has a pixel size of 16 by 16 meter. And it has information about volume that you can find in the forest, about biomass. It's based on empirical models that uses remotely sensed data like airborne laser scanning and the National Forest Inventory plots. Right, so we have information of what is right now in Norway in the forest. You have species, you have volume, but we don't know what's going to happen next, right? We cannot grow it. We don't know what's going to happen with this forest. So what we needed, it was a productivity map, which basically a productivity map in forestry, usually we estimate it with an indicator that is side index, right? But it basically measures how happy the trees are in a place, right? If this species is going to grow well or it's not going to grow well. So we had different alternatives to build this side index, this productivity map, right? So we had this airborne laser scanning for some areas, but it's a static image, right? So but you will have two, and in some cases we have two, we could calculate how much or how well we're growing, and we can have an estimate of site productivity. We could also use existing site models, but they do need information that is only available at plot level, like for example, soil type or vegetation type, right? So most of them had several caveats for this purpose that we wanted. We had also forest management inventories, FMIs, which are the inventories that the forest owners do for their property, right? And they usually include productivity for the species they are growing. So most of these possibilities that we considered at the beginning had some caveats, some problems. They are not available for all forest areas, for most of the cases. For non-forested areas, because you don't have trees, we couldn't estimate the site index, site productivity. And the site index, when available, it's only available for the current species. So how something that is not growing there would grow in that place, we don't know. So we wanted a site index productivity map for whole Norway that will be available for all forest areas, also for non-forest areas, and for the three main species in Norway. Okay, so the focus is on predictive performance. We wanted a model that predicts well, that can fill up the whole Norway. What data we have? Potential variables. There are 54 variables that we used. There are climatic, temperature, and precipitation. There is a land resource map that it's from the 70s. That are actually based on field data. So people going to the forest and seeing and describing what they found. There is parental material. We didn't have soil, but we thought maybe parental material can say something about soil quality. We have topographical variables, depth to water, the depth that you have to go in the soil to find the water, geographical variables, and also we included airborne laser scanning data and Sentinel-2 bands, right? On the other side, we had the data we used to fit the potential models. That is the National Forest Inventory, which is over 8,000 plots. This is the permanent site. And independently, we also measure temporary plots every 10 or 15 years by region in Norway. The red ones are the NFIs, the National Forest Inventory. You see that covers whole Norway. And the blues and I think it was orange, are the temporary and the FMIs that don't cover one of the largest forest areas in Norway because we deemed it that the data was too old to actually use it. Okay, so but that was a pretty good number for using artificial intelligence, right? So we have good data sets, we have good data, we give it a try, see what goes. So we selected booster regression trees, which is a machine learning algorithm, and we fed it two types of models. One to define if the site was productive or unproductive. It means that if the trees grows beyond a certain limit or not, and models that if they grow over this certain limit, we define productivity classes, right? So we define models for the three main species to predict their productivity. Advantages. I was traditional forest growth in the model, right? So we usually use regression. So I wanted to say a comparison of what is the things that I like about machine learning. And I talk about boosted regression trees, which is the algorithm we use, but I think these advantages are shared by most of many of the machine learning algorithms. So, nice things. It's insensitive to outliers and multicollinearity. We use all monthly means, right? There's a lot of collinearity between temperature and precipitation. There is also correlation between the different bands of sentinel. There's a correlation in all the variables, basically, that we use. So, insensitive to outliers is a plus, and multicollinearity. It can also fit nonlinear complex relationships. And that's a tricky one if you do regression, right? Especially when you're dealing with a lot of variables and the relationship might be discontinuous, or they might have ecological thresholds. Like, think, tree is happy when it's wet, but not too wet. And if it's a little bit too wet, it's still not going to work. And if it's a little bit too dry, it's not going to work also, right? So it's not a smooth curve necessarily. It can also automatically detect interactions, so that's a work you don't have to do. I mean, you still have to tune the hyperparameters, right? But it's still a positive, I count it in the positive side. It can handle also missing data, which was the problem with some of the layers that we use. Because all the data we use had to have wall-to-wall coverage, right? So we can predict forest productivity in all Norway. And it does not require data transformation. So we throw in variables, we tune the hyperparameters, and our results were actually quite good. I'm pretty happy. So this, for example, is a comparison on the distribution of siting productivity classes from the National Forest Inventory, so that's true data. Okay, that's the light gray, and the dark gray is what our productivity siting that's boosted regression tree, what we were predicting. And this is in the validation data, right? So it's independent data. So I think it's pretty good. We had some problems at the beginning with predicting correctly the lower and the higher classes, but we found a way to do it. And pretty happy with the results. If we look at the root mean square error, so how good our models are, on the dark gray is the boosted regression trees, and on the light gray is the forest management inventories. So this is the models, so the data that is currently used for forest management. And we see that for birch, which is the right one, we outperform FMIs, so the lower the better, right? We outperform the FMIs in almost all the classes. For pine, we also do better in most of the classes. And for spruce, we also do, we match or we are better than the FMIs. So, not bad. So one of the questions was if using remotely sensed data, right, the ALS variables, the Sentinel-2, would produce bias or would improve our model at all? Because you're using current information. For example, if you want to say something about, so our theory at the beginning was big trees only occur at high productivity places, right? You don't have big trees in, shitty places for trees, right? So we think, okay, so if trees has to say something about productivity. It actually didn't work in that way, but it worked in other ways, right? So we use, for example, the crown cover, and that says a lot about if the place is being productive or not, right? So it didn't work the way we intended it, but it worked for other things. So we look at if in places where there is no trees, for example, that has been recently harvested, our models with remotely saved data would produce bias, while our models without only the traditional variables would not be a bias. The results were like, they're equally bad, to be honest, or equally good if you think about it. So that's remotely sensed data, which is usually not used for this type of productivity mapping. Improve the results. So the light gray is the simple model without remotely sensed data. The black one is the full model with remotely sensed data. So for the deviance, the shorter the bar, the better. And you see that the full model is better, clearly better. for all, or almost all, I think it was all of the sightiness classes for all the species. And for discrimination, which is how well the model can discriminate between a sightiness 6, for example, and a sightiness 8, our model was also better. Not horribly better, but at least slightly better. So overall, I'm pretty happy. Was out of work. Something new for me, so it was a little bit of, it was a learning curve, but I have to say it probably would have been more painful, and the result would not have been as good if I was using traditional regression. And that's it.
Okay, this is the moment for questions to these communications. We have 15 minutes to do it.
Hi, good morning. I have a question for the detection of a STEAM image project. Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if you say it, but what species do you analyze? The STEAM image you use, of what species? No, no sé.
Hello? Yes, now, yes. So the current image I'm showing is from larch. But our target species is actually 5. So oak, beech, larch, pine, and spruce. And from the pine species, larch is the worst one. And for the broadleaf species, kindly say beech is the hardest one. But oak has its problem that oak, as we know, oak, the wood property of oak, they have a growing phase that when they grow certain big enough, that they seal their hardwood. So in this case, our measurement is approximately 20 centimeter diameter oak. When we cut it, we visually see there's hardwood. So for hardwood detection, when using iuFOR detection, no problem. But this